Hi folks, this is Amber Insights. I'm Zori Amber, she, her pronouns, and today I thought it'd be really helpful for everyone to just be on the same page as to what I mean about dissertation. So before we get started, please remember to like and subscribe. That really helps me out. That helps other people learn more about my videos, and I just really appreciate it. And yeah, let's get started. So before we can even really go into the difference between a traditional dissertation and multi-article dissertation, we have to talk about what is a dissertation. A dissertation is a research project completed as part of an undergraduate or graduate degree. The dissertation process always looks different depending on the program, depending on the school. So how I describe the dissertation process may look a little bit different from other people's, but hopefully there's still some overlap in terms of what a dissertation is and what a dissertation entails. So hopefully this will still be helpful for people. So in my program, there's two types of dissertations that you can choose from. One is the traditional dissertation, and the other is actually a new dissertation style that my program is doing called the multi-article dissertation. The multi-article dissertation that my program is doing is based off of the 3-article dissertation, but still that doesn't really explain where the difference is. So here they are. The traditional dissertation includes 5 chapters in my program. Chapter 1 is the introduction. The introduction chapter introduces the reader to the overall topic of the dissertation. Chapter 2 is the literature review. Basically, it's the so what of the dissertation. So the lit review builds a case for why the author is doing the dissertation that they're doing. It basically helps show what the literature already says about the topic and helps fill out the blanks for the reader in terms of why this topic is important. Using the literature review, the author can build a case for why it's important to do this research. And they can help the reader understand what has been done before and give the reader an idea of the direction that the author is going in now. Chapter 3 is the methods section. It basically helps the reader know how the researcher did what they did to 1, collect the data, and 2, analyze the data. The methods section is basically who participated in the study, the participants, the demographics, that type of information, how the data was collected, what measures were used, what survey questions were used. Also, the methods section talks about how the researcher basically analyzed the data. Did they analyze it using qualitative measures, which means they went through the interviews, found common themes, maybe certain words that the interviewers said, how they picked apart and found meaning in the words. Or it could be done quantitative, which is what calculations were used, what data analysis methods were used, that involved either statistics or probability, that type of stuff. So basically, if I read someone's method section, I should be able to replicate that same study and hopefully get the same answers. Chapter 4 is results. Results chapter may also be another section that feels really self-explanatory. It's basically where all the results from the study, from the data analysis comes and is put together. For some studies, that might be the most intimidating looking part because a lot of times if it's quantitative, there's a lot of numbers. If it's qualitative, there's a lot of words. But the results section clearly, or ideally, should clearly state what the researcher is doing and the results that they had. And chapter 5 is discussion and conclusion. This chapter connects the results of this study with findings of previous studies, either adding on to those findings, or they could suggest that those findings are different, maybe because of different populations. Basically, it takes what's in the results section and puts it into a way that clearly states, like, what does this mean? Yes, we know this measure gave us this answer or this result, and this measure gave us this result, but what does that mean in terms of the bigger question that the researcher is asking? So it connects those pieces, and then it also puts forth the implications of the study. What does this mean for the field? And possibly, what does this mean for the community that's being researched, the people who are being researched, and the world in general? This section talks about limitations, basically what other studies who may choose this topic for future research, what they can do to improve it, what they can do to get better results, things that maybe the researcher at the time didn't think of, or maybe populations that they wanted to reach out to but they couldn't. So that should be another area that future research should look into. So yeah, that's the traditional 5-chapter dissertation. Like I said, the traditional dissertation can still look different in different places. I know there's some places where there's 4 chapters, so it just really depends. But the components that I talked about, the chapters that I talked about, are typically the chapters that are in a traditional dissertation. So now we're going to talk about the multi-article dissertation, or sometimes called the 3-article dissertation. So my program recently, originally we were calling it the 3-article dissertation, but now we're calling it the multi-article dissertation. And basically it follows the same ideas of the traditional dissertation. The only difference is instead of 5 chapters that my program requires if you're doing the traditional dissertation, there are 3 sections that my program requires if you're doing the multi-article dissertation. So the first one is the introduction, so similar to the traditional where you're introducing the overall topic of the dissertation. And the second part is the articles section. Now, this is probably the biggest difference between the traditional dissertation and the multi-article dissertation. As the name suggests, the multi-article dissertation includes articles. So instead of having separate chapters answering possibly one research question, with a multi-article dissertation, even though you have the same topic, so let's just say our topic was YouTube videos, you're doing different studies basically. So I can have one article that's doing YouTube videos of Black academic YouTubers and their influence on other Black students going into the PhD programs. But another article in that same dissertation could be whether or not more authentic videos have an impact on future students versus more educational videos. So those are 2 different studies looking at 2 different things, 2 different questions that I'm really interested in knowing about, but they still have the overall theme about academic YouTube basically. So in those articles, you're still doing the lit review, you're still doing the method section, you're still doing the results, conclusion, and discussion. The main difference is, like I said, you're just doing it in article formats. And for some, you may think, isn't that more work? The goal of the multi-article dissertation, at least in my program, is that by the time you graduate, you'll have 2 potential first author publications that are ready to be sent off to a journal, and you can put it on your CV that you have these 2-article dissertations that are ready to go. It actually might be better because instead of having to go through the traditional format type of dissertation and pull out the data and the results that you receive and try to put it into articles that will help show that you're a publishable researcher, the multi-article dissertation kind of already does that. So let's review. The traditional dissertation includes 5 chapters. The first chapter is the introduction, which introduces the reader to the topic of the research as a whole. The second chapter is the literature review, which provides related literature usually from scholarly academic articles that builds a case for why the dissertation writer is researching the specific thing that they are. The methods section is chapter 3, which talks about who participated, how the data was collected and looked at, what measures or survey questions were asked, and how the researcher knows these are quality tools and measures to help the researcher answer the questions they're trying to answer. Chapter 4 is results, which again is pretty self-explanatory, but this is a section that the researcher takes a really in-depth look at all the data that they collected and the information that they found based off of their hypothesis. And then chapter 5 is the discussion and conclusion, which connects the results to what we know and how it expands upon what we already know. This section also talks about the limitations of the study and areas that future research should explore. Essentially, it helps make a final connections for the reader about the study's findings and importance. The multi-article dissertation contains 3 main sections. The first section is the introduction, where it introduces the research to the topic as a whole, similar to the traditional article. And then there's the article section, which combines the literature review, methods, results, discussion, and conclusion sections. And then finally, the third section is the conclusion, which is similar to the traditional dissertation, where the major findings of all the articles come together, and it's explained how the findings impact the current literature and their collective implications. Okay, so that's it. I hope this was helpful. I hope this was insightful. And as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell button to be notified of future videos. And I'll see you next time. Bye.